Hello and welcome to this week's installment of Yilungelo Lakho. It's your right. Sinilethela lolu hlelo bukhoma la mamba phambili SABC 1 eMzansi for sure. Isifikile-ke akajali intokazi iniphathele olunye ulwazi oluningi namhlanje njengenjalo mbukeli. Ekuhambeni kwesikhathi uyazi phela ukuthi asinivaleli ngaphandle neze. Sizokuvulela phela ingciki ukuthi nawe ukwazi ukubamba iqhaza khona la ku 011-714-6918 or 011-714-6919. Our email address is consumer@sabc.co.za. Ungasithola futhi lapha ku Facebook noma ku Twitter. Asibhekane nendaba yethu namhlanje. Well, puzzled and frustrated by your unusually high cell phone bills and mysteriously vanishing data from your mobile phone? Well, you're not the only one. Scores of South African mobile phone users are either forced to frequently top up or are burdened with puzzling bills often running into thousands of rands. Now, this is often blamed on obscure services that consumers have unwittingly or deliberately subscribed for, but the use of your smartphone, the apps, the downloads, as well as other internet services may be also draining your pocket. A Centurion consumer north of Johannesburg is still bitter after settling a 20,000 rand bill. Nalgo to Tabalak.
uRocheteli waseCenturion uzizwele ngokwakhe ukuhlukana nemali engango-20,000 ekhokhela ukusebenzisa umakhalekhukhwini wakhe. Wathola ukumangala uma kufika isitatimende esasikhombisa ukuthi ukweleta izinkulungwane zamarandi.
It normally was about 805, 806 rand per month. I'll tell you what happened. I had a contract renewal done on the specific data package, and it ran for 6 months normally. And I think in October, November of 2015, I got this very weird invoice, or rather billing from them in excess of 19,000 rand for data usage.
Okwaba yindida ke kuTheli ukuthi usebenzisa iWi-Fi endlini yakhe kanye nasemsebenzini ukuze asebenzise internet. Qabukela elisebenzisile leli thuluzi. Wazama ukucwaninga ukuthi kungani kumele akhokhe imali engaka. Kwezaboncedo lwezincingo alisebenzisayo. Kodwa zanhlanga zimuka ngomoya.
My first call to the service agent of the service provider was dictated that I was up between, I think, 10 o'clock at night and sometime in early morning. Now, the amount of data that was billed to me was just not making any sense. I couldn't make sense of the content. I even asked them, can I have a breakdown of the sites and the things that was how I was billed? They couldn't provide it to me. They were going to email it to me, but it never was forthcoming.
The South African National Consumer Union, iSANCU, ithi izikhalazo ezifana nezikaTheli bazijwayele kakhulu. Le nhlangano inenqwaba yezikhalazo lapho khona umthengi ejwayele ukukhokha u500 rand, kodwa bese kufika istatement esingaphezulu kwa60,000. U-Ina Vulcan oyisihlalo salenhlangano uthi inkinga ekutheni abathengi abanika kahle ulwazi olwanele uma bethenga omakhalekhukhwini ukuthi bazodla kangakanani noma kanjani.
The Consumer Protection Act of 68, 2008 very explicitly says consumers have rights. One of the rights are the right to be informed. If you're not informed, if you don't know by buying a certain package or using excess bundles all of a sudden or data that you were not aware of because you were not told, and you get these kind of accounts, I've got a huge problem with that.
Ekugcineni uRoche kwamele akhokhe yonke imali abeyikweleta kanti lokhu kwamshiya engathokozile neze.
I've got 3 facilities with this one service provider, 3 different contracts, and they suspend me my entire services for the, as they would call it, the default on the one bill. And I've been a consistent payer. I've been with this service provider for in excess of 15 years. And for this one error on their side, which they don't want to admit, they've suspended my services in entirety. But I'm still paying the service, or the subscription fee monthly, but I'm not getting any service rather.
Ina uthi ukuze abathengi bengazitholi sebesenkingeni efana nekamfo kaTheli kumele befundisise futhi beqonde ama-contract abasayinayo uma bethenga omakhalekhukhwini. Futhi befunde nokusebenzisa omakhalekhukhwini babo phecelezi ama-smartphone ngokuhlakani.
They should go to their settings and then they should see what they can switch off. They must remember that when they use Facebook, it uses a lot of data. And even in the background, while they're using Facebook or Twitter, it downloads. Use Wi-Fi wherever possible. Wi-Fi is cheap, and in many places it says, it's free of charge. So make sure when you're in a shopping center, use your Wi-Fi. It's not going to cost you anything.
ISANCU isenxuse izinkampani ezidayisa omakhalekhukhwini kanye nokunye okusondelene ukuthi bebhale emabhokisini izixwayiso zokuthi izipho izinto ezingadla i-airtime noma idatha abathengi benganakile. Kanti inethemba lokuthi lokhu kuzosiza kakhulu ekutheni abathengi bekhokhe isikweletu abasijwayele. Nompumelelo Mthethwa, Yilungelo Lakho, eGoli.
Siyabonga kakhulu-ke ngalo mbiko siwudidiyelwe nguNtokazi lapho Nompumelelo Mthethwa. Manje ukuxoxa kabanzi ngendaba yethu masamukele ubhuti uAndile Masuku, yena-ke ongumhlaziyi wezochwebeshe phecelezi ye-technology analyst. Andile, siyakwamukela. Thank you so much for joining us.
Siyabonga.
All right, and of course in our Pretoria studio sinaye ePitoli uIna Wilkin obuya kwinhlanganiso yamalungelo abathengi iphecelezi iSouth African National Union. Ina, a very good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Only a pleasure.
All right, maybe let's start with you, Andile. Usichazele kabanzi ukuthi nina umsebenzi wakho usebenza ngetechnology. Kahle kahle uwenzani?
So the African Tech Roundup is the biggest African Tech podcast, iTunes, which is the biggest platform for our podcast around the world. So we cover news of tech and innovation, digital news across the continent and beyond. Anything that affects the African continent and users of technology on the continent, we talk about on a weekly basis. And I'm very grateful to say that we're well supported.
All right. And we just saw you in an insert there giving some tips, but maybe a little bit of background for the benefit of our viewers. What exactly does your union focus on?
Well, we mainly focus on to inform the consumer of their rights, and we are there for consumers. We fight for consumers, and especially with something like what happened since August last year, with the huge cell phone bills consumers got. We tell them where to go there, and we interact with the ombudspeople where they go to. So we are there to inform consumers, to tell them what their rights are and to educate consumers.
All right. Mbogeli, we had also invited cell phone service providers, Vodacom and MTN, but they said that no one was available to participate on this program, and that was the same case with Cell C. But all the same, the show must go on, Ukono Andile, and we're very thankful to have both of you. Let me start with you, Andile. What do you think happened in the case here? Lokhuzana yathela lapha kwi-insert 20,000 rand nge-data ongazi ukuthi yapho ongayisebenzisi wena.
Now, one of the first things is it's quite possible that the problem is on the network side, where there's been a glitch, your account yake may be mixed up with someone else's account. Let's put that aside because we can't speak we can't speculate on that issue. What is also quite likely or probable is that because you can use your device as a hotspot, it's quite possible for someone else to have access to it. You tether from that device, abanye abantu use it, using tons of data coming off your contract without you even realizing it. So that's the other thing. You might have other devices, other users on the same device tethering from your device using your data account. Then, of course, there's the possibility that you yourself have signed up for certain services, apps and the like that are using data, far more data than you realize in the foreground, as we call it, in the foreground, that is as you're using the phone. So whenever you pick up your phone to actually use it, I'm talking about that kind of thing when you're sending a message, a voicemail, a voice message, or even just, participating on social media. That could happen. In the background as well, as our other guest has mentioned as well, things are constantly happening in the background of your device, updating things, syncing with other apps and devices, unbeknownst to you, things that you've personally signed for as you downloaded that app, in which case, Batibona, you are responsible for any data costs that result from the use of this particular app, and you would have signed for that when you allowed the app to be downloaded to your phone.
I'm going to come back to that to broaden on that note there, Andile. And I just want to find out from you. I mean, are these the type of complaints that you deal with that we saw in our insert there with Telly? And how do you advise consumers that have such a problem?
Yeah, well, I agree 100% what he said. That is the problem. Consumers are not aware of this. That is when you buy smartphones. So I think it's time that consumers start realizing what they are paying for. So first and foremost, do you really need the smartphone? Because it's since the smartphones came in that consumers start getting these huge accounts, which nobody can tell them what is actually going on. And as we heard, and as I've said before, it downloads automatically. So the advice I want to give consumers today, if you've got a smartphone and if you think it's necessary to have one, switch off the apps that you don't use, because all the apps that are switched on the cell phone download automatically while you use it or even at night. We had complaints from Sanku. For example, it is a Vodacom complaint. What happened there? The consumer had an iPad. The iPad was stolen and he received an account of 51,000 Rand 2 months later. So what must you do if something like that happens? Immediately report it to your cell phone provider so that it can be stopped. Be careful what you do with your SIM card. So there are a lot of things that consumers can do. My problem, however, is with the cell phone providers. I'm talking about MTN. I'm talking mainly MTN. And then, of course, Vodacom and a little bit of Cell C complaints we get, not much. It is the service they give to the consumers afterwards. Once the consumer have signed that contract, they couldn't be bothered, and that is a fact. I have complaints where consumers keep on writing, keep on going into their shops, and they get no joy from the providers. So I hope the providers are listening this afternoon. It's time to look after your customers.
You're absolutely right, Ina, and we had once again imbukeli besibacelile ukuthi beze bazozichaza ukuthi kwenzakalani, because it just seems ukuthi indaba mase kumele bona baphendule akekho umuntu obala. But Andile, I just want to understand that, back to that insert again. The guy clearly explains that he had a fixed data contract where he paid a certain amount of about 805 Rand. How does then the additional charges come on? I mean, how would he have signed on for apps that were not allowed to be part of the contract?
Unfortunately, there's just one little box that might not have been ticked, or one little box that did get ticked that might have said, that might have given the mobile telecom provider the permission to basically override any limit that he might have signed up for and let it carry on a pay-as-you-use basis. Now, I'll tell you for one thing, I get offered contracts all the time. Don't ask me, that's another issue, how they get my number and how they're allowed to use it for that purpose, to call me to offer me this and offer me that contract. I'm still on a pay-as-you-go contract. Why is that? Because I am what I'd call a super user of data. Right? It is very important to me that I keep tabs on my data use. And that's really one of the biggest recommendations I can give consumers out there at the moment. Listen, if you intend to make use of a mobile device for for most or a lot of your data use, I suggest you get a separate device, right? Very recently, just last week, in fact, one of the country's larger providers, telco providers, they're one of the smaller mobile telco providers. They own one of the smaller telco providers, but have come out with very, very attractive data plans that will make you feel like, oh wow,
I'm spending less.
I'm spending less.
Spending more.
And what their strategy is now is let's onboard the volumes. Let's onboard the masses. Let's bring people who never used data before or have up to now used maybe 200 megabytes at a time. Let's get them to get used to using 1 gig, 2, 3 gigs a month, and let's incentivize as many of these people to come on board. And before you know it, you're in for streaming and all sorts of services that require tons of data, and you're basically a junkie for this data, but you're not quite ready to start footing the bill.
You know, Andile, I'm going to come back to that in a short while. Mbukeli, iyashisa indaba yethu yabuya khona manje unganyakazi. Siphinde sikwamukele futhi mbukeli, khumbula-ke manje our lines are open. Please shishayele ucingo la ku-011 7146918 or 7146919. Ungasithumela i-email ku-consumer@sabc.co.za noma usithole lapha ku-Facebook, or do send us a tweet. Namhlanje ke sikhuluma ngokuthi yindaba i-data yakho ihlala ibaleka lapha kwi-smartphone sakho. Nginayo ubhuti Andile, nginayo sis Ina lapha ya e-studio sethu sase-Pretoria. You know, Ina, somebody just asked now, what then is the corporate social responsibility upon the service providers? You touched on it a little bit earlier on when it comes to information about these smartphones and contracts when people buy them at the service providers.
Yeah, that's a very good question, Alicia. You know what? The Consumer Protection Act is, as I said, one of our rights is the right to be informed. Now, if you don't get the right information, how would you know that your bundle usage is going to go to that huge amount? So my problem is the consumer is not informed when he signs a contract, and they must actually tell him what it's going to cost him. That's the one thing. And Andile also touched on that. The contract the consumer sign is extremely important. You might tick a box that you don't want. That is what the service provider is there for. He must tell you exactly what it entails and what it will cost you in the long run. My problem is that consumers are not informed properly.
Absolutely. Doesn't that then constitute a breach of contract on the service provider's side, Ina? And what can consumers do about that? I mean, we've heard things about the fact that every contract must be written in a language that the customer understands, and we are still yet to see that.
Yes, well, that is for sure. But I think consumers must also take responsibility. If they don't understand what's in a contract, they must ask somebody to tell them exactly what is in that contract, or they can take the contract home so that somebody there can explain it to them. But never just sign a contract. Never sign blank spaces. But you are quite right, Alicia. The time has come that people must insist on a contract that they understand and that they have got enough time to read through.
In fact, there's a principle called caveat scriptor, which implies that the one who signs must beware. And I'm sure Ina would be very well familiar with that term. You have to take very seriously the legal implications of what happens when you take upon yourself to sign on the dotted line.
Absolutely.
Even when you don't understand. I think oftentimes the law will stand on the side of a provider that has put something at least in writing, and will certainly ask you to stand, to account for whatever you've signed for. So you need to be very careful in that regard. And I hear what you're saying in the sense that, yes, the corporate giants need to care a lot more.
Absolutely.
They might argue.
For them, it's just selling the product. And
Yeah.
I mean, if people are not asking questions, a lot of people, I wanted to ask this question, Andile. A lot of people don't know that their phone their smartphone is basically not user-friendly unless they have to download those extra edit apps.
Now, it's interesting. Here's an excellent example. Twice in the last month, I've been driving along and I've seen chaps next to their German vehicles pouring fuel into them at the side of the road.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is a simple principle. I don't drive a German vehicle, not because I can't afford it up front. I could probably, put together some pennies and make sure that I can afford one up front. I choose something of Asian descent simply because I think about what it's going to cost me in the long run. And I think the education, to Ina's point, the education around letting consumers understand this is this is a serious lifestyle upgrade. Going from a feature phone to a smartphone is a serious lifestyle upgrade. It's not just about getting the phone, which you can probably afford or get on credit very easily. Think about how much more data it will cost you, how much everything you download to make your life happier, more interesting, more vibey. At the touch of a button, you are adding rands and cents literally to your home budget that you didn't think you were adding.
But I'm still thinking 20,000 Rand is just a bit too much. Busi, so our first caller from Sekunda, siyakwamukela Nsizwa, umbuzo noma umbono.
Yebo sisinjani?
Siyaphila Nsizwa.
Okay, yeah, mama mina ngifuna ukubuza la. I think I'm relevant because it's about contract phone, ne?
Yeah.
Yeah, what happened is in 2010, I was still working for another employer. I got a cell phone contract phone with MTN. And then eventually I had to leave my employment because I got a bursary. And then I phoned them. It was like 7 months earlier before the end of my contract. To ask how do I end my contract. And then they gave me the amount, even though I'm not sure of the figures now. And then I paid them 7 months earlier. So they continue giving me airtime. I think by then it was 100 Rand, 100 and something airtime. And then after the contract was expired, say maybe it's expiring this month, and then next month they continued giving me airtime as well. And then now I phoned them that time. I told them, no, now you are making a mistake because now the contract is supposed to be finished because you gave me the amount to pay and finish up the contract in India. And then you were supposed to end giving me airtime last month, but you gave me airtime this month. Then they said it was their mistake. They are going to sort it out. Then come the second month, they gave me airtime again. Then I decided, no, let me stop using this number. Then I stopped using the number, changed my number, and then continue living. Then eventually 3 years ago, let me say like 2014. And then I was getting now these calls that I owe MTN now. From now the lawyers or something. So my question is, how do I get out of this? Because I'm not willing to pay them because we've negotiated that I am finishing my contract early, and then I gave them the amount that they've asked by that time. And then now I'm getting the calls from the lawyers. I think they call them MPTs. They say I owe MTN. And then now I don't understand. How do I sort that issue out, or how do I get out of it? Because I'm not really willing to pay them.
Well, I just want to ask a few things before we address your question there. The contract we tata ibikokela in company or ibikokela when out of your personal pocket?
Out of my personal pocket.
Out of your personal pocket, but you made a lokuzana. You took the stand ukutuba phone before ushi umsebenzi wati usetlisha I lokuzana the rest of the months that were left on the contract.
Yes, that's true.
Okay, and then manjage, when you stopped using the number because they kept giving you the airtime, what happened? Airtime should be say number when ungasayisebenzisa.
Yeah, no, I didn't mind about that SIM card because I didn't want stories. Because I phoned them about the airtime as well and asked them, no, please stop giving me airtime because now this thing I'm done with it, I don't want stories. And then eventually I stopped using the number.
Okay, are we sebenzisanga lo airtime wena Siphiwo?
I cannot be sure, but I decided to. They say on their side, they've said, okay, because it's their mistake, they'll sort it out on their side. But when I realized the second month comes another airtime, then I decided, no, let me not use the number. And then now they continue now. Oh, okay, then they were quiet because I was using another number. Then like 2014, then I'm getting the calls that I owe them.
Okay, Ina, what can you say to our consumer there? I mean, it sounds like a problem that you might have dealt with there at the union.
Yes, absolutely. No, he's quite right. I mean, he followed the right procedures. They cancelled the contract and he stopped using the phone. So I would suggest he now goes to the National Consumer Commission. The web address is www.ncc.nationalconsumercommission.org.za.
All right, thank you so much. Sibusiso Nsizwa, ngiyathemba ukuthi usizakele lapha uthi awuxhumaneke nalabo abantu base-NCC uphathe wonke ama-documents wakho, and I'm sure ukuthi you've detailed everything. I mean, calls, this is the nice thing that also people don't realize. When you call service providers, those calls are recorded, so you actually can use those against them. We're going to take another quick commercial break. Welcome back, Mbugeli. Remember to take part in our discussion. Please call us on 011-714-6918 or 714-6919. You can also email us your thoughts to consumer@sabc.co.za. Alternatively, usithole lapha kuma social media platforms. I hope akasebenzisi data eningi. Akasibheke ukuthi nithini lapha ku Facebook. Usonobile Vincent Taitai uthi Yilungelo Lakho, I'm using a company tablet and it eats my data too much. The company is deducting from my salary. I phoned the service provider. They said due to internet session, which I don't even understand what to do. Help, please, in Johannesburg. Who can answer this one?
Sure. Very simple thing. Firstly, I feel sorry for him if he needs the tablet to actually do his day-to-day work. If he doesn't, well, switch the thing to Wi-Fi only. Also, one of the easiest things you can do to see exactly which app on your device is spending as much. If you're on an Android device, hop into your settings, go to data usage, then it'll show you in a graph form how much each app on your phone is using on average, right? If you see an app that's using an abnormal amount or an unusually high amount, and it's usually the usual suspects are streaming, things like YouTube, Facebook has become a monster now because it's constantly syncing.
And it's also got video now.
It's got video now, so it's syncing back and forth from your photos into your contacts. You've got a new contact, it's syncing, it's finding new things, doing things in the background, making your life so much more interesting, but so much more expensive. So go in there, go into your settings, data usage. If you find one that's doing a little too much, chowing a little too much data, you scroll down, you'll find a little button down there. It's on a restrict background data. You switch off that button for each app that seems to be chowing a lot. Of course, it'll inconvenience you because it won't continue to sync as you've continued to do.
You'll have to keep
on resetting all the time. But certainly, if it's a work thing, switch off everything that has to do with your personal usage. Reserve that for your prepaid account. Use the one for work, specifically for work and nothing else. I
was about to say that, Andile, wouldn't that make life easier to just use the phone tablet for, the tablet for work purposes, so that you don't run into bills that are unaccounted for. Let's see what more comments are saying on Facebook. There Masofi Madlala wakaphago uthi Majali i-internet ngisebenzisa kakhulu kuma social network noma lapha kwi-Google mangibheka izinto ezithize, kepha ngakhetha ukuzithengela ama-data ngoba lento ama-contracts awukhoni ukubona ukuthi usukweleta malini, ubona nje nge-statement. Siyabonga kakhulu. I think Masofi, that is just what we've been saying, ukuthi rather get a pay as you go so that uzokhona ukutrack ukuthi imali oyisebenzisayo kwi-data ingakanani. Siyabonga kakhulu Masofi. Usisonke Maka esona Mkhwetyana uthi kukho lanto ufake i-airtime ngoku usanduyifaka ingabikho, ufonela ka-customer service bathi ujoyine into ube wena ungazazi nalonto, why bengakunikezi i-airtime yakho back? Do you think that it's possible for the network or the service provider to give you back your airtime?
I think that is highly unlikely. The volume of business that these people, the mobile telcos are operating on, usually the prepaid consumer is far behind in terms of priority, far behind their business and enterprise clientele, the type of people who could make it hurt for them if they didn't keep them happy. Unfortunately, I have to be quite the cynic on this one. Unfortunately, my sister, Sisonke, Sisonke for sure.
Ina, here is one for you from Nzuzo Tuba Makulusi. Says, #right, I think it should be an offense to call someone and advertise a product to someone. I mean, the other problem is that they increase their rates without even informing us as consumers. Back to that whole breach of contract. Ina, what do you say to that?
Yes, I quite agree. You know, according to the Consumer Act as well, they are not allowed to phone you in any case before 8 in the morning and after 6 in the afternoon. And nobody is allowed to phone you on any marketing issues over the weekend after 12 on a Saturday and also not on Sundays. Having said that, she is quite right. The problem is you don't even think of a new phone or of upgrading, and then you keep on getting these calls. So they're enticing you all the time, telling you how wonderful it is. My advice is just immediately say you're not interested. Once you want to upgrade, you will go to a service provider and you will upgrade. And as Andila said, we as consumers must be very careful. Do we really need these very fancy phones? Because those are the costly ones. Let's go back to the basics. What do we really want a phone for? To contact our people, to contact our children, and perhaps, you know, be available for the work.
Absolutely, Ina.
You know, there's something I thought of. I think what's also happening is a lot of these packages are offering people to take a second or third or fourth phone on the same contract. You take one out for your children. We're actually indoctrinating our children to be these massive consumers of data, and we're not teaching them to value, you know, to value the rand, you know, and realize how much they're spending here. In the meantime, all of that data cost is coming to the same account. It's going crazy. The gentleman in the case earlier, now he says he uses it for business. I don't know how many of those phones linked to his account are being used by his children, for example. And it's quite sad to see. And you know, to speak to Ina's point again, we've got the GSMA coming out with an incredible data point this past week, saying more than half a billion, we have more than half a billion mobile users on the continent at the moment. So you've got Africans who can barely afford, and a vast majority of those people don't even have running water and electricity in those homes. So you start to see that there is a problematic, issue around prioritization, around education, financial education, and other things related to that on the continent.
Certainly, I think there needs to be more education around those issues. Let's take Nkula from Etzanin, Limpopo. Nkula, thank you so much for staying on the line. Umbuzo no mumbono pot. Yebo pot.
Minjani?
Siyaphila pot Nkula, usibuza umbuzo nsizwa.
Umbuzo ngicela ukuqala ngokukhomenta ne.
Yebo pot, you can go ahead.
Into yokuqala thina i-consumer siyenza i-mistake. Nayo i-company lesithatha ama-contract amafoni ane-mistake, because kwenzeka mina uthola ukuthi mina ngijabulele ukuthi ngizothola ifoni, le-documents basinikeza yona iba namagama amancane, ama-alphabet amancane, amanye noma ungakwazi ukufunda uthola ukuthi awukwazi ukufunda, and then ngibe ngiyasayina, and then leya document uthola ukuthi i-page yayo A4, and then i-consultants ayiniki i-chance yokuthi umuntu okwazi ukuthi afunde understand every before ayisayinele. But naye ngoba usebenza nge-profit i-consultants abese uyanisayinisa, after that uyothola ukuthi manje sengithola into eziningi zifakwa efonini, angisakwazi nokuthi mina kwenzekalani, ezinye zize ziyongena nakuma-legal department. Ngitsho kanjalo ngoba nami nginayo i-contract, but le nto kumele ngiyisayinele uthola ukuthi manje seyina la ihamba itshintsha khona, and namanje ngibhatalela ifoni abasanginikeze leya airtime angikhulume ngayo iku-contract kuphela yefoni above 2,000.
Sure. Okay, siyabonga kakhulu Bhuti Nkula. You know what he's basically saying? He's saying that, Ina as well, he's saying that it seems that, everybody gets so excited by the fact that they're going to get a new phone and they don't really read the fine print. And he's basically saying that it's also a consumer's fault because, they really should be able to read that A4 information and not just go and be excited and be captivated by the fact that you're getting a new smartphone. Bukele, sizoyiqhubekela le ndaba emva kwalokhu ngayindawo. Siphinde sikwamukele futhi mbukeli. Namhlanje we're discussing cell phone, airtime, data and billing issues. My guest live studio uBhoti Andile Masuku, a technology analyst, and of course from our Pretoria studios we have Umama Ina Wilkin. We had also invited cellular network services providers, the MTN, Vodacom, bonke bathe abakhona ukuthola umuntu ukuthi bamlethe ukuthi azokhuluma nathi kule show, and that was the same ke ne-Cell C. Kodwa ke naba abantu e-studio bakhona, indaba iyaqhubeka. Sathu Thamsanqa eFoslora sekwamukela insizwa umbuzo noma umbono.
Sanibona.
Yebo Bhoti.
Yeah, ngine problem nami nge-SABC, ngine contract enireceive last month. Now, mabe qala ukungithengisela, ngengathi mina angithengi izinto over the phone. So, but I'm interested, kodwa ngicela bangithumele i-contract kuqala. Of which azange bayithumele i-contract ngabona sebe-deliver ifone ngoba bese ngibanika ama-details wami wonke. Now into enzakalayo mayifika ifone ngifake i-sim card, unfortunately ngafaka i-sim card kwi-slot esi-wrong, akakayisebenzisi since ifikile ngayibuyisela emuva for repairs. Now mangibafonela ngibatshela ukuthi ngifuna ukwazi ukuthi i-data le since ngingakayisebenzisi ifone bathi ngiyayiforfeita i-contract yami itsho njalo. Ngithi no, i-contract ifone ifike i-contract ngingakayifundi angayiboni i-contract. So I kept on phoning them and then they transfer me from one person to another. Even today, ngikhulume nabantu abayi-4 but angatholi answer, and then they send me contract now ngingakayifundi ithunyelwa ubuyitumelo silega or correspondent department. Now my problem is this. I-contract bengakayifundi and bangaka-explain everything, but ngama-recordings nami mangifona ngiyarekhoda nami nama-recordings wabo. So another thing is this, abantu bakithi abamnyama basithengisela lezi zinto because bamafantu abelungu basifaka this problem. Khona manje ngiyabafonela bangitransfera from one person to another. 4 people today azange solve the problem yami.
But Thamsanqa siyabonga kakhulu ngaloko nsizwa ubambe nje kancane lapho cingweni. Ina, here is another worrying issue here. I'm sure you've probably dealt with an issue like this. He was sold a cell phone contract over the phone. He insisted that they send him the actual contract and they never delivered it, but the phone was delivered first. When he received the phone, he actually, I think he put a SIM card in the wrong, was it the wrong slot?
Yeah, put it in the wrong slot.
He put it in the wrong slot, but then when he took the phone back with the contractor, they told him that he had forfeited the contract. Are these issues that you are familiar with? And then he's been trying to call these people. He's being sent from pillar to post with no recourse.
Yes. No, I am familiar with something like that. What you must remember, I don't know how quickly he took back the phone and the contract, but you've got 5 days in any case. Even if you signed a contract, you've got 5 days to cancel that contract. But say it was past those 5 days, then in this case, I think he's got a case. Because he got the contract after he got the handset, and wasn't there anybody who could show him how to actually put in the SIM card? So it's not really the consumer's fault.
Absolutely.
And I think that is the problem we have at the moment, that the providers are not interested to assist consumers. Once they've delivered the handset, they've got the contract, they just couldn't be bothered. And I've got a huge problem with that. If you think that the cell phone companies is billions and billions strong of rand, and yet they treat the consumers as if they're not important. Consumers are the most important people in any organization. They are the people who keeps the economy going, and I think it's time that providers and industry realize the importance of the consumer's voice.
Thank you so much. What do you want to add there, Andy?
I believe that's called a cooling period,
The 5 days.
yes, that period, that 5 days. And I've had an unfortunate incident, not with a mobile telco, but with another supplier in a totally different field, where they intentionally ignore any attempts you're making to contact them over the cooling period, knowing full well that as soon as they respond to you after the cooling period has expired, they make it your problem and they send you legal letters saying, hey, touches a move and things like that. And it shouldn't be like that. What the caller needs to understand, and other viewers listening, is that as soon as you sense any discomfort whatsoever, even with a contract you signed in store, head back there real quick with that contract, dump that stuff there. And that's usually, especially from a legal standpoint, absolves you from any problems going forward in trying to prove that you basically benefited from this either contract or this device, and obviously these guys obviously provided the service. You want to make sure that you demonstrate quite quickly and quite emphatically that you're not willing to carry on with this, you're not benefiting any further. Take it back, take the paperwork. If he hasn't even received the paperwork, like he said,
hadn't, yeah.
He needs to put that in writing, go and deliver that in person at one of the nearest places. I found that when you take, as Ina says, when you start to realize how much power you have as a consumer, it becomes very empowering. Absolutely. You start to realize these people, and I say these people, unfortunately, I don't mean to paint everyone with a black brush, but you start to realize how much power, certainly as a consumer, you have.
Let's quickly take one or two Facebook messages before we go to the ad break there. Mata Melwana says, Yilungelo Lakho, ndicela ukubuza, kukhona enye into ochatha kuyo mahala ithiwa yi-VPN. Ingaba yona ayinabungozi kuma-data akho efonini ekuhambeni kwexesha na? Andy?
Well, we've got a little hacker. Marta, you are a hacker, my sister. Okay, so eVPN, what is the VPN? eVPN is a virtual private network. It's a network that's constructed using private wires, but often the internet. Now, this is, she's right. If you know what you're doing, there are things you can do to actually operate off the main internet, right? Off the legal web. Unfortunately, it's not something I can promote because a lot of nasty things happen in what's called the dark web, parts of the internet that are unseen.
Those untrusted sites that you get warnings about.
Yes, and they're also unregulated. Then the even darker parts, what's called often the deep web, places where technically even your mobile telco can't even see you go there. And technically you can use data in those places that doesn't count towards
what are
your
such
data.
things, Andil?
You see now, that this is not something your mobile telco wants you to know about. Actually, in many respects, these are the types of places, and I have to warn you, Mata, these are the places where nasty things like human trafficking goes, child pornography, things are found there. Transactions can happen on using cryptocurrency, electronic currency, which is a simple form for it. Transactions can go on in the dark web as well as the deep web that you don't really want to be. So we wouldn't want to encourage our consumers to try and find ways to use data, in the dark web. So that's not something I'd want to encourage.
Let's leave it there. Let's not
Yes.
encourage it any further. Andile, a very quick one before we go to break. Msasazi, eyami phone iyayitya i-data straight ene kudala ndifonelwa mna kwa MTN bezamile ukundinceda but andikancedeki nangoku. Ingaba ayikho enye indlela endingancedakala ngayo bhuti wami ose-studio. Do you want to take that one very quickly, Andy?
Very quickly. Firstly, jump into your settings up here. Jump into your settings, go to data usage. I mentioned this earlier. You want to get stock of which apps are chowing you. Things like Snapchat, popular, but it will chow you because all those videos are constantly syncing with your address book, syncing with the internet, syncing with other apps. You want to make sure you know which which apps are actually sucking as much data. Restrict that.
All right.
Also, something very interesting you can do, browsers like Opera are giving you the option to sort of to manage your bandwidth, compress the bandwidth, so that when you're using Opera, you pick the option to compress your bandwidth within Opera, you spend less.
All right. Well, Mbukeli, I hope ukuthi uzwile lapha ke sithatha ikhefu lethu lokugcina lazi la nomona ixesha namhlanje siyabuya emva kwalokho. Sikwamukele futhi mbukeli sesizovala ke uhlelo namhlanje kodwa ke awuthi singasithathe insizwa lapha yaphansi kwaNongoma uBodanke. Bodanke siyakwamukela insizwa ithi iqaba njengoba sesohamba.
Yebo naphila sisi.
Yebo bhuti wami.
Yebo. Nami sisi I'm the one of the victims but mina anginayo i contract.
Yebo, bakwenzeni?
Ngibafonelile nezolo kwaVodacom. Ngibafonelile nginokuthenga ama-data but kuthi kuseni ama-data sengekho ngiswishe off into mangibafonela bangitshela ukuthi kunezinto engizijoyinile angingajoyinanga ngix mangibabuza yini engijoyinile bathi hayi uthelo sisi uthena hayi angisayiboni lezi zinto besengiyidelethile.
Hawu kodwa isathatha idata yakho.
Na last month ngibafonelile bangitshela ukuthi angiye kwi-graph ngayenza i-graph ngaswisha off zonke izinto but izolo ngafaka we-59 rand la 250.
Okay.
Makusekuseni awasekho ama-data ne-airtime kadisele nayo ayisekho futhi.
Lalela weBodanke ngizothi uAndile akutshela ukuthi wenzeni ukuthi wenze sure ukuthi ugada idata yakho but inumber ze-NCC zikhona la kwi-Facebook page yethu zizovela futhi at the end of the show. Very quickly.
2 words: software upgrade, flush your phone.
Okay.
4 words actually. Flush your phone. Get a software upgrade. We'll keep all that software that might still be sitting in your cache.
And chowing data.
Without you realizing it. Also, just removing the logo or the actual icon doesn't necessarily mean you've taken it off your phone.
Your parting words today, please, very quickly. We've run out of time.
Yes, certainly consumers have rights, but they also have got a responsibility. And I want to urge service providers to start looking after their customers.
Thank you so much. Ina Wilkin joining us from our Pretoria studios. Which apps should parents guard against that their children are not using? Very quickly.
If you find Holla on your child's phone, get them to take it off immediately and sweep that phone immediately. Holla, H-O-L-A.
All right, Bazali, sithemba ukuthi nizwileke lapho mbukeli. This is where we end today's show. Let me thank my studio guests for making time to be with us. Ngithanda futhi ukubonga nani babukeli ngokubamba iqhaza nokuthi nibe nathi kuze kube manje. Please join my colleague uSimphiwe Ncongwane, new face la kwi-show yethu next week Friday for another consumer affairs discussion from me, Alicia Jali, and the whole team. It's goodbye. Yay, niwabheke la uma contracts nala uma cellphone nisale kahle.
Yilungelo Lakho.